Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here. Well, I should say that I've been dealing with the digital world since I was 17, when I first learned to code in 1971, so that's kind of like my entire life. And so, and I've been doing this ever since. And what I've always been doing is also looking at it from a political security point of view, be it with cyber attacks on my country or with maintaining safety and privacy in all matters digital. But today I'm going to, we have to look at how the world has dramatically changed in the last 12 months, and I know Ann here has told us, said not to use a certain name, so I'll just talk about the U.S. administration and its policies in the past year, which basically, though we have not really noticed it, have upturned the potential or have overturned security in all matters financial in ways that we don't really understand yet. But it begins with American financial dominance, which has now been completely abused by the government in ways that it never has been before, which we saw really in, first with the use of American sanctions against judges they didn't like, two of them at the International Criminal Court, and one in Brazil who presided over the court case against the Brazilian president, former president Bolsonaro. So the sanctions were not simply, as we saw last week with, or 2 weeks ago with Thierry Breton, but they were financial sanctions. And what that meant is these people could no longer use MasterCharge or Visa or make actually any kind of financial transactions using a bank because of the US sanctions law. Banks are not willing to make any transactions because they would then get in trouble with the US government. And so these people were just, they're sitting there and they can't do anything. More importantly, or equally importantly, is the ongoing, as we speak, battle over the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. Again, we think of this as being kind of one of those American things. However, the importance of the central bank in the United States for worldwide finance, especially for my interest, European finance, is so great that today the European Central Bank, the UK, Swedish, Swiss central banks all issued a statement saying they're very concerned about this attempt to get rid of the chairman of the Federal Reserve because the person I can't mention wants to eliminate the independence of the U.S. central bank. Now, central bank independence is the cornerstone of trustworthy currencies. And the fear is that with the complete dominance of the worldwide financial system by the United States, that these moves, be they at a personal level or at the level of the independence of the central bank, or then somewhere in between, with the willingness of the US government currently to use economic pressure to achieve political ends. We've seen it mainly with tariffs, but on the other hand, as Christine Lagarde already asked in the autumn, the chairman of the European Central Bank, like, what if the United States shuts down MasterCard and Visa for Europe? Or for a country. I mean, they've done it with persons. So we're facing a financial existential or financial systems existential threat now that no one could have ever imagined until this past year. And Here, I mean, I'll just read the statement because it came out today. The independence of central banks is a cornerstone of price, financial, and economic stability in the interests of the citizens we serve. These are all of the bank presidents. Also, I mentioned South Korea and Japan, I think, also added this. It is therefore critical to preserve the independence with full respect for the rule of law and democratic accountability. Now, we are, because the world is so globalized, we have become so dependent upon these worldwide financial systems, basically with the United States dollar as the reserve currency, that that if this becomes politicized, it affects everyone. So despite the US administration's hostility and antagonism toward any kind of globalization as the bête noire and the force that made everything bad to make America ungreat, nonetheless, it uses the power of a globalized world to achieve political ends. And that's where we are today. We have not realized this threat yet, but we have to find a solution to this. And the solution which exists and has existed now for a number of years is the central bank digital currencies, also known as CBDCs. And the way this works, and this is to tie it into the whole discussion of blockchain, is that the answer is a form of blockchain. And I won't get too technical on this, but the idea of a central bank digital currency hinges upon a kind of blockchain which exists, which has nothing to do with Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any of those other things. Now, the way to understand, I mean, what it's called, its technical name, is either a permission blockchain or a KSI, or keyless signature infrastructure blockchain. Where it's used, it was first actually pioneered in my country. It hinges upon a critical discussion in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, the 99.999% of discussions, whenever we talked about anything digital, is privacy. Privacy, privacy, privacy. All I ever have to do, all I ever have to talk about when I talk about digitization of a country is privacy. I don't mean to denigrate privacy, but sorry, that's not the real problem. To give you an example, privacy is about, say, your blood type. If what's private about your blood type is you know your blood type. And, well, someone finds out my blood type, it doesn't really bother me, but that's kind of an example of someone stealing information to find out my blood type. Then there's the concept of integrity, which is, are my records, the records of my blood type, do they have integrity? So if someone finds out my blood type, it may be unpleasant. Or someone finds out how much or how little money I have in my bank account. On the other hand, integrity is if they change my blood type, which could lead to my death if I go to a hospital because the records say I have this kind of blood type, and then it turns out I don't really have that blood type and they give me the wrong blood. Or, I mean, in the case of my bank account, if they change my bank account, it's unlikely they will change it to give me more money, right? I mean, steal the money. Data integrity is the crucial issue of any kind of digital system, and it has been, it's only with the rise of the blockchain technology that guarantees integrity that we have actually started to talk about digital money. Before, people were concerned, or people said, well, we should have, why don't we just transfer money digitally? Well, The problem is that there was a lack of security. There was the lack of security in terms of transferring the money, but also the lack of security if someone goes in and changes money. So the solutions only came at the beginning or the middle of the 2000s, of the two aughts. And we implemented it actually in my country because the solution was invented in my country. And since 2007, all critical national data are on a keyless signature or permission blockchain. Now, when I say critical national data, that is all health records, all property records, even all laws, because if someone goes and changes, since our laws are no longer on paper, they're all digital, if someone goes and changes the law, I mean, that would wreak havoc on your entire system. So we have put all this stuff since 2008 on keyless signature infrastructure or a permission blockchain to understand how it works. A permission, or the blockchain used in Bitcoin, is that everyone has to sign off on every any transaction, which is why it takes forever for a blockchain sort of transaction to go through. A permission blockchain means that there's a permission granting authority or two. So take the example again of my medical records. I can change my medical records. My doctor can change my medical records. No one else can change my medical records, but it is on blockchain so that it is immutable. Just as with my property records, I can change the my property records. Say I sell something to someone else, and they get it. They get the property. That's on blockchain. That is permissioned only by me and the buyer, and of course the Estonian tax authority. But those are the only people who can have anything to say about it. So this was the key to actually coming up with the idea of a digital currency. Now there's another kind of digital currency which is basically the Bitcoin model called stablecoin. The problem, but these are all run by private companies and they're all pegged to a currency. Almost always they're pegged to the US dollar. So a stablecoin has the benefits of security integrity that a keyless signature does, except that it doesn't reduce your dependence upon the United States because it's all based on the US dollar. So to give you an example of what that means, if Jerome Powell is replaced by Steve Hassett in the United States, who decides that, well, why don't we change let's start printing money, US dollars, and you print a lot of US dollars, and the US dollar's value goes down, then if you're using a stable coin, you suddenly have less money. And if you're living in Europe, or you're living in Sweden, or living in Japan, or anywhere else in the world, if your national current, or if you're using stable coins for transactions, you suddenly lose a lot of money. So, I mean, basically, we have to go back to trusting our central bank. So this is where we are today. We're not there yet today. What we have to do is to start thinking about our national currencies and how they can be manipulated, and how threatened we potentially are by the dominance of US credit card companies, that if the US government chooses to do something, sanction one or another person, sanction a country, sanction the European Union, if suddenly 450 million people are without any access to any kind of financial transaction, because who knows what that unnamed person might do in a fit of pique. we have to reestablish our independence and our sovereignty when it comes to finances. And since we've gotten to the point over the last 40, 50 years that most of us use credit cards to do almost everything, we need to move on to maintain our independence. Now, there are some caveats with this as well as some positive things. Right now, only China has moved toward a central bank digital currency, and it's not on a big scale yet. Christine Lagarde of the European Central Bank has, as I mentioned, said that for our financial independence, we do need to move toward a European Central Bank digital currency. The main opponents to this, aside from various Luddites who don't understand technology, have actually been the private banks. And I think Anne here can actually sort of, add to this. But I know that Sweden tried to introduce a central bank digital currency. But the people who were opposed to it were the private banks. Now, why are private banks opposed to a central bank digital currency? Because they are not involved in any kind of financial transactions, because every financial transaction with a central bank digital currency goes directly through the central bank in Frankfurt. Now, banks make a lot of money on the overnight interest rates. So if you think about it, you may only get a few pennies but even a few pennies for every transaction, billions of transactions. Private banks make a lot of money for doing transactions. So they are violently opposed to any kind of central bank digital currency. And so no country in Europe, in the Union or outside the Union, so far has successfully implemented a central bank digital currency, even though it makes a lot of sense, because private banks have a lot of lobbying clout. I would suggest that we're at a point today where the interests of our private banks should take second place to the interests of our national sovereignty and security, given the volatility of especially the current situation in the United States, where we have seen a willingness to use the massive financial power of the U.S. for political ends that never have been political ends as long as the United States dollar has been the reserve currency in the world. And, okay, since I have to finish, I'll do it on time. Plus, there's one more advantage to European central bank digital currencies, is that the digital footprint of a keyless signature infrastructure transaction is about 0.79 euro cents or rather 0.79 kilograms per digital transaction, whereas any Bitcoin transaction is around 700 to 800 kilograms of carbon for every single, all the people using Bitcoin, every time you use a Bitcoin, you've just added almost a ton of carbon into the atmosphere. So it is also ecologically something that's sound, but that's a secondary matter. I won't go into that. But I will say that our currency is our lifeblood of our countries. Our countries do not work if we don't have a stable currency. Just look at all the countries that don't have stable currencies. Iran is a perfect example of what happens when your currency is no longer stable. If you want to destabilize Europe, as we saw in the national security strategy published by the United States a month ago, where the goal is to break up the European Union, then we know that we are politically we're in a politically risky situation already when that is the declared political intent of the owner of the reserve currency of the world. So my plea to you is to think about something as arcane and bizarre that you've probably never ever heard of, which is a central bank digital currency. But I assure you, your central bankers, whoever they may be, in our case, Christine Lagarde in Sweden, UK case, you have your own people who actually are very worried about all of this. It's going to be the new and next thing coming up, I assure you. Thank you.